Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, and I got a review for you today from Image Comics with Skybound Entertainment. We're going to be talking about Kroma, issue number 4. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe on this guy's channel right here. It does help a lot. The interaction is the main thing I'm here for. Just hit that like when you come in. You know, maybe if you want to hear some more dope reviews, you know, hit the bell. You never know when I'm going to release these things. I have no schedule. Alright guys, so the series finale of Kroma. I'm going to give you the review first, and I'll give you my final thoughts. I can say one thing. This always happens when I find a book that or a series that I really like. It's always hard to get to the ending because you don't want to be disappointed. I don't. And on this book, this has been one of my top favorite series from 2023. Has been outstanding. It does come with a hefty price tag of $7.99. We talk about some of the best money well spent, man. Alright, so for those of you that don't know, I mean, this is the series finale. Kroma is all about this, our main character, Kroma. And she has, you know, different chromosomed eyes, right? So she is supposed to be the daughter of this sun king, this color king that's up on this mountaintop and stuff. And we found out at the end of the last issue that that's not what's up there. And you know, all this is based on the last civilization in humanity, the Pale City. And the Pale City believes that there's this sunlight king, this high colored king or something like that. They believe that he sent all these monsters out on the world. I mean, that might be the case. The book doesn't really go into there, but there are all these like crocodile, you know, alligator looking monsters. And by this point in the book, I mean, the first issue, we find out they are all attracted to colors. But at the very end of the last issue, we did see that Kroma did make it up to that you know, the place where the king is supposed to be. He is not. It is just a bunch of those huge crocodiles that are up there. But you know, with the last issue kind of cemented that she was looking, you know, she kind of figured out how to control them and talk to them, and you know, and that's kind of where they left us off with. I showed you the first page. It's just some kind of, not some kind of, but it's just splash images of, you know, the world still taking place in the same fashion. It shows an owl going after a mouse, and sure enough, the owl, you know, ends up like cutting the mouse as it grabs it, and it attracts those, you know, crocodiles because the color red. We know by now that red does mean attack. That's why they are so drawn to blood. It's not even attack. I think it's their action color, and that's what gets them to attack. So the book jumps back over to the Pale City, and we catch up with some of Zeet's friends. Zeet was, you know, the main character from the first issue that ended up dying, but he was the one that found out about Kroma, that she was just a regular girl. At this point in the story, June is one of he's supposed to be the next, you know, he's taking Zeet's place next to the Machiavelli. I think that's how the Maccabi, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he's starting to question everything, and at this point, he finally tells his friends that he's had enough, that the Maccabi isn't making any sense. And at the very end of this page, he basically goes up to that tower and he tells the Maccabi he wants the truth. At this point in the book kind of cements like Kroma's life with these crocodiles. I don't have a name for them, color crocodiles. I wish we would have got a name for them. I don't know what to call them. But these massive giant lizards we see that Kroma has like not only integrated with her, but at this point in the story, going back to what the kids were talking about, they kind of mentioned that since she's left that tower, that it's been a year. So she's pretty much been with these alligators for a year. They do show in these little bitty panels that she is hunting this deer. It gets to the point where like her whole tribe, all the crocodiles, and they show you like all these little red eyes around the deer and stuff. But at this point, you know, she's working on her skill alone, and she doesn't want the rest of the crocodiles to, you know, do the work for her, and she's literally trying to hunt the deer by herself. She ends up failing, and it's just, she's only slightly off. She's trying to spear the deer, but at this point, you know, she doesn't want to lose the deer, so she does. Then the book shows you that she has stuff set up to control the crocodiles, but she has this little like wrist slingshot, you know, and she launches the red berry at the deer, and that's what gets the crocodiles to go after him. They show different kind of cool stuff, like the crocodile is actually sharing a meal with Kroma. Not only that, but at one point, and it kind of goes back to this, but Z is always there. We find out that the main crocodile that she is with is also named Z. And Z finds it really strange, the ghost of Z, because at this point he is just in her mind. But he kind of states that it's weird that she named the crocodile Z, but at the same time she mentions that it's her favorite name. It's kind of one of the only names she knows, kind of thing. So she kind of takes it, it, as like a pride thing, as a proud moment kind of thing for Z, that she still carries the memory of him. But of course she would. Z was the only person that saw her as a little girl versus this monster. I kind of mentioned this before, but they kind of show some other cool scenes. Like right here, she took a bone and she's playing fetch with the new Z. At this time, there's a conversation between the ghost Z and Kroma, and it's all about, like, she spent a year out here and she hasn't bothered to go back to the Pale City. She's kind of tired of her conscience bringing this back up, and she relays the message as far as, like, every time she thinks of the Pale City, there's a and she mentions it as far as roots. There's these red roots that come up, and every time she thinks about the Pale City, of course it's anger, but her fists tighten, her short breath, she gets a short breath, her chest starts to, beat, and she's getting angry every time she thinks of the Pale City, and at this point she has no desire to really go back, kind of thing, because she's been living in peace with these crocodiles, no hate, no, and there is a level of communication. At one point during this conversation between Z and Kroma, this loud noise comes up, and it's after the second time that she's thrown the rib out and playing with Zeke, and we kind of know that it's Zeke. Something happened to him, and sure enough, it's this guy that's been following her from the second issue, and he's finally come out of his shadows, and he's basically he tells Kroma that he's been following and waiting for this moment. He took out her best friend, which was that Z. He ends up killing him. And after this, it just puts, Kroma in a rage. Not only did he kill one of her family members, but he's still going off of this conscience that she's some kind of monster controlling these other monsters, which technically that is right, but she's not a monster, kind of thing. She hasn't attacked the Pale City, none of that. But he keeps mentioning that that he knows what she's up to, that he has watched that she made it up to that mountain. He couldn't go up there because it was surrounded by the crocodiles, but he knows that she met with the king and they're devising this plan to go take out the rest of the world, kind of thing. At this point, she just tries to talk some sense into this guy, that's saying that the Pale City was all wrong, that they were living off these lies that the Makavi was putting into them. And as this goes on, you see these red roots getting thicker and taking more form, kind of thing. Eventually there are blows. He ends up like stabbing her in the hand and like attaching her to a tree. Eventually the Kroma does get this one moment after he takes out the I don't know what you call that blade. It's like a harvester, reaper, I forget what you call those things, a sickle. But after he takes that, sickle out, she is able to get this moment in when she ducks, and she ends up tackling him, getting him to the ground. This is where she gets most of her words in, like, hey, you are living this lie, there is no king up there, you all have this weird misbelief on the whole world because you've been listening to this one guy. But eventually during this conversation, she has to splash this blue stuff to stop the other, crocodiles for intervening and going after this guy now that there's so much red. And blue basically means wait. So the book at this point jumps back over to the Makavi story, because at this point we see that Kroma has overpowered this guy, beating the crap out of him as she's talking to him. So we jump back over to the Pale City, and they're going through another they call it a celebratory day, but they call it the hatching of the black egg, shown here. It happens once every 10 moons, the book says, but it's basically the first scene that we saw Kroma in from the first issue. And the boys down here are asking where their friend June is, and they haven't seen him in the last couple nights, ever since he went up to that tower. Eventually, the Makavi comes out, tells everybody that this glorious day is upon him, that it's time to unleash the monster. And as soon as he says that, the monster's supposed to come out of the egg, and he does not. The Makavi pumps it up as far as like, the monster is even more defiant now, from the last occasion. The Makavi is also setting it up as this is the same monster from before, that Kroma never escaped, or they captured her, but it's supposed to be the same monster. So when they do open up the egg, and you see it's somebody in the it's not somebody, it's June. But it's June in the monster outfit that they have, and he's all tied up. As soon as they get him out of the egg, the whole town commences to beating him, minus the kids. We do see this conversation between Kroma and that guy, and she's basically thanking this guy for finally listening to her and kind of understanding a little more. And then as the panel goes up, we find out that she killed that dude, and that was the only way that he was finally going to listen to her and admit to the real truths of the world. But at this point, Chroma's, she's had enough with this guy showing up and kind of still stating the fake facts of the world, so to say. Because pretty much everybody in the Pale City has been, kind of Pied Piper, let's say. They've been, mind-bended to this ideology that's not really true, and so at this point Kroma has had enough. She is listening to Zeke, and Zeke has been telling her to go back to the Pale City. This guy's showing up with all his anger and hatred and everything, and the red roots taking form in Kroma. She takes the orange color, which means like it's kind of like I want to say like a unity color, like it tells the whole tribe to move out, kind of thing. And that's what we see during the whole Black Egg celebration. We see all kind of different panels. We see the crocodiles moving out towards the Pale City. We see that the whole town, and minus the kids, are beating June without even realizing that it is June. Eventually, with the crocodiles getting closer to the city, there starts to be earthquakes and loud noises, which the Makavi tries to tell people, earthquakes have happened before, we're all good, and that's what we get. We kind of get over here. We do get some of Makavi's people being like, hey man, we need to kind of get to safety, something's going on. Makavi eventually tells, he takes some of his like security people, and they head up top to see what is going on. And as soon as they do, Chroma's right outside with her whole crew, and she starts announcing what is going to happen, and basically she states, you've been cowering behind these walls for so long, hiding from things you don't know, and you don't understand. You've been dreading nothing but fading stories. You've made me out to this monster. Guess what? Let me play the role of the monster. And after that, she pulls up a bunch of those colored balls or whatever, and unleashes them on the city. And after this point, it is just like everything you can imagine. It's these massive Godzilla size crocodiles, and they have just been told by their leader to attack the city, and that's exactly what they do. There is no after this point, the color of the book, as you can see, is nothing but dark blood, gore, and that's exactly what it is. There is something important that goes on during this, but the kids, as you can see in this one panel, they do make it to June. They do realize that it is June in the costume while all this is going on. Eventually, Kroma does find the boys that now have June. And Kroma is just more persistent on finding the Maccabee. They do tell her that, and it's June that tells them, but that the Maccabee has went up to his tower, and basically that's the next panels they show us is them trying to get the Maccabee into safety. They do lock him into the tower where the other guys go outside, and as soon as they go outside, you just see this panel with a whole bunch of crunch. Basically those guys got eaten. The next scene they show is Kroma opening the door, and we get something that I did not expect, but it kind of fits. But at this point we get this whole backstory from the Maccabee and why he did what he did. But basically all this sums up to it's all kind of his fault. We see that this woman got pregnant. We find out that Kroma had a mother. She did get pregnant, and as soon as they had the baby, they realized that Kroma had the two colored eyes. The mother ended up running off, and she runs to the Maccabee, the current Maccabee, because at this time that didn't exist. But she tells this story that she has to be killed and put down, and that there has to be this story of this high colored king, and basically this woman had relationships with the high colored king, and that's how they came across with Kroma, and basically inventing the story that Kroma is like this monster that they captured from this king, and that's going to keep them safe, and then they basically started the Pale City kind of idea. And that's how Kroma came along. They do show, and it all goes back to like when Kroma enters the door and he sees he sees Kroma, he realizes how much she looked like her mother minus the colored eyes kind of thing. While he's telling the story and finally admitting all the guilt and basically telling Kroma that everything was his fault and he was a horrible father, but not only that, but I just mentioned it, but he was the father. And like you find out at the very end that it wasn't that's why she ran to him, the Maccabee, was because they had relationships, and technically that is not technically, it is Chroma's daughter. He just made it seem like it was this monster thing, and they made this whole story. He ends up killing his own girlfriend, but he does state that she was the one that wanted that or whatever. So it doesn't get much colder than that. You get this backstory that this guy, and he basically sums it up that at the time that the world had these rules and they couldn't reveal that they had relationships, or that they had relationships as far as having a baby kind of thing, and so they had to keep it secret, and that's how she came up with this whole plan. To me, it sounded a little wishy-washy on the Maccabee's part. It sounds like he was just trying to get power, and he just used this opportunity to come up with the story to take over the city. But as he is telling the story, he kind of leans up with this like little bitty like crocodile claw, and he ends up taking his own life, slicing his own neck in front of Kroma, ending that horrible cycle of lies and everything that this guy has spread. Before Kroma went to the tower, she did give the boys some of those blue balls, and the blue basically means like, I think it means like weight or something like that. But it kept them safe during that, and basically Kroma had told them that every time they use one of those blue balls to move away like silently and slowly kind of thing. So we come back to the boys, and they've been using the blue balls to, keep safe and everything, and they're actually getting to the end of those blue balls, and they don't know what to do. One of the boys screams out, "Oh my God, something's coming through the blue mist," and we see that it's Kroma. And at this point, we have one of the more deeper conversations, because at this point, the other boys, besides June, still see Kroma as a monster, even though, she's in human form in front of them. Chroma's still, flabbergasted that they are still, and they still are attaching to this belief, even though they just, broke June out of his monster costume, and Kroma brings that up, but she basically gives them Zeet's notes that she has kept from way back then. She does mention that in Zeet's notes that he mentions all these kids. But basically, in the notes, she has added instructions on how to live among the monsters peacefully, like detailing what the colors represent and stuff like that. One of the boys finally, says something real. He was like, "How do you expect to trust? How do we expect to trust you?" kind of thing. And June does speak up, kind of relaying like, "Hey, y'all just found me as the monster. You know that guy was lying," kind of thing. How could you still believe this kind of thing? But after that boy does speak up and he asks like, how could we trust you after you came into the town and basically killed everybody but us with your monsters and everything? And at the very end, she just relays for them to read those notes, that it'll help them get through this life kind of thing. But at the end of it, they can't trust her, and she doesn't plan on letting them trust her. She tells them that at the very end, she's going to go back up into that, where she was living with the crystals and where the crocodiles lived, and she's going to disappear. She's going to go live by herself with those monsters. So trust isn't going to be an issue. Hopefully they read those notes and learn about the world, the real world that's around them. And basically she leaves off. She puts that orange color, and all the crocodiles head out, and that's basically the end of the story. She gave them the necessary tools, and basically the very last page, they show June, and June is using those notes, to live in this world kind of thing. And the very last panel just says, like, it's up to you, whether y'all, can make it in this world or not. There is this page from Lorenzo di Felici to his father. So before I get into this last thing, because there is something in the very last, I'll give you my final thoughts. I love this series. It was fantastic. I almost cried at the end of the book. I didn't. It was right there, but I almost did. It was so sentimental, and so many important lessons in this story. When you get to what the actual story is about, and it's just about living the world that's around us, and not having these blind, colorblind, images of the world around us. And I live in that world. I live in this colorless world, because I don't see race as far as color. We're all humans. Since I was a kid and now as a grown man, I still don't get this ideology that just because we have different color skins, we're different people. We're all human beings, and that's how I live my life. I don't see color. I don't like when color is used either fashion to justify this or to justify this. People are bad, there's no justifying that. This book touched on that topic, like you wouldn't believe. And not only that, but to represent a character as a color, that was phenomenal. Everything was breathtaking. I did not know what to expect from the ending. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I always get real nervous when you get to the end of the story, because you don't know how it's going to end, especially when you love something. You don't want it to end, kind of thing. But if I had to think of a conclusion to a story, man, it was so great. She gave these people the tools to go forward and live, their life. She went with her crocodile buddies, her family, and she went and lived in peace. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the story. There could be a lot more, and it's really up to Lorenzo, right? But for me, it was fantastic. I loved it. I loved her going back to the city and really getting revenge on everything that they've done to her and her life, and the crocodiles, and but so very last thing I want to bring up is a image. It's an image of a book that's coming out in June, but it is going to be the first book of a shared universe. It says the ongoing series is the start of an all-new shared universe, and something you absolutely won't want to miss. It's called Void Rivals, and it's going to be written by Robert Kirkman, and art by Lorenzo di Felici. So if you love the art in this book, which I did, you'll definitely want to be on the lookout for that book coming out in June, which I will be adding it to my FOC. Alright guys, that's my review. I know it was long, but this book was fantastic. It was a big boy book, and it's fantastic. Lorenzo knocked it out of the park. That's my review. That's my thoughts. Let me know down below what you thought of this series, all together, after getting to the final end. I will let y'all go. Bye guys!